Beth Barany here, Gala Russ, my co-teacher here in the Substack Live. Today, we are both writing teachers. We love helping genre fiction writers with their fiction from idea all the way to completion. And today we're going to talk about verbs. So it's all go, go, go on the verbs.
So important.
So important. We're going to talk about how verbs do the heavy lifting, how verbs are your story's engine, how specific verbs create instant showing, and how verbs reveal character. We're going to go dive into that specifically, but Gala, why don't you introduce yourself and maybe give us a little bit about what you were saying right before we went live about some of the common mistakes that you see writers make in their early drafts around verbs.
Hi, I'm Gal. If you hear weird creaking noises, we have really bad windstorms here, so I feel like my entire house is moving and creaking, and I will be one of those. Oh my God, Dorothy, and my house is gonna be picked up, and I'm gonna end up in some magical land. It really feels that way. So apologies, and I hope that neither internet nor electricity cuts out. But I'm Gala, and I teach genre fiction authors. I really, really like working with beginner authors uh, who have an idea about a book, who started but really can't figure out how to finish things. Because there's so much overwhelming advice, and all of us love to sit and scroll on whatever social media or newsletter, and it's like, oh, this is a good advice. Oh, this is good advice. But I think the most important part there is actually sitting down and applying and have a supportive community and somebody to guide you to get through all the noise, pick out what is actually important for your novel, and sit down and actually apply it and do it and do the writing. So I'm very much pro practice there. And I also like working with people who write genre fiction and want to have a better or a romantic subplot and really are not sure how to go about it. So I work with a lot of people who write romantasy. I work with some romance authors as well, but figuring out what romance has to do with your story and how to put it on the page is something that gives me so much joy. And verbs go in both places. They're important no matter what you do as a writer. And I think if I were to pick two things that early writers don't should do differently, maybe I would recommend not focus on strong verbs in your first draft. Actually, I would say in the first draft, who cares? Just get it done, get it finished. If every third sentence is he walked and felt and saw, I don't care. Get it done. But once you are done with all your developmental edits and you're like, okay, I think I'm not going to be moving major chunks of my story, which for me is usually like maybe fourth draft. That's me. You can be different. Then start digging in and having a good list of what weak verbs are to go through and find them. A caveat is strong verbs are still a spice. If you put strong verbs everywhere all the time, that's where purple prose comes in. That is also not good. So figuring out what is the middle and where it is important, I think that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Is a matter of taste, a matter of genre, a matter of expertise and experience. Yeah, I don't know, but that's where my mind went. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're saying about not forcing every verb to be a strong verb is a great caveat. I still think verbs need to be intentional. Even that's what I mean by a story engine. They need to be intentional, whether you're using a verb like was, or you're using even look versus gaze or something. There's a time for a verb to be soft, so to speak, or not as specific, and then there's a time for it to be very specific. So the verb to me is doing this incredible work, and it's in revisions we want to be intentional about that. So we're in alignment there. So just some simple examples. And again, I love what you're saying. So I work specifically with science fiction and fantasy writers. And sometimes the way a character moves through the scene is doing like triple duty. It can indicate the kind of person they are, kind of character, kind of being they are. They can indicate setting. They can also indicate state of mind. intent, motivation, physicality. So just specifically, so we have some specifics. This is based on using my character Janie. We could say Janie went up the stairs. Totally fine. Or we could say Janie bounded up the stairs and learned something about her emotionality. And there's no right or wrong way to make this choice. It's really all contextual. It's about the moment in the scene, and sometimes you need it quiet, and sometimes you need it active. And so that's for movement. I want to show you another one for pacing and energy. We can have Janie went down the corridor. I have Janie going down corridors because she's on space stations. There's always a corridor or a hallway. Or I could say Janie hustled down the corridor. Now we have a sense of intent. We have a sense of energy. Yeah, we have this strong picture of her physicality, but also what she's about. What is it she's going after? And then this is from one of our clients who always writes about Alice, a version of Alice in Wonderland. So you could have specific action, specific decisive action. Alice went through the portal, which is fine, or Alice dashed through the portal. Now we know she's taking specific action. She is getting through that portal because it sounds real important. So that's just some before and after. And again, this isn't for every scene and every moment. You get to decide. And my rule of thumb for deciding this kind of thing is what do you want the reader to really dive into, really feel, really see? It's almost like putting a spotlight on that moment. And obviously what also needs like this intense energy and action. So that's what I have to say about just my examples around specific, general versus specific.
Yeah. I think specificity is where both you and I always 100% agree. And students who come to my classes hear me say the word specificity like so many times. I don't know if it were a drinking game, we'll all be drunk by the end of every class.
Yeah.
It's like, be specific. What specifically? The specific, whether we go from character or plot, or whether we go into the line edit, specificity does matter. It makes stuff so much more, it gives it more oomph. And where my mind, when we were talking about verbs, was when I look at as like a line editor or work with authors, there in my mind there are some like categories of, I like how you call them software verbs, because everywhere I've seen weak verbs, strong verbs. I actually like soft verbs and strong verbs, because again, there's nothing wrong with the way with walked. And I think the difficulty, why do we want stronger verbs, is because if you have a lot of repetitive soft verbs, it flattens the prose, and it sounds very like frou-frou, flattens the prose, but it just means that it's not evoking anything in the reader as they're reading, and we want reader to feel things as they read. That is the primary goal. We want to evoke emotion, and that's why you are going to have scenes that are kind of calmer scenes, and you might want to have just walk, because you're just getting them from point A to point B. But if you are in a high intensity pieces, parts of your story, those stronger verbs are going to play an important role. I usually categorize them as walking verbs, and this is not always working. So probably maybe like movement verbs.
Yeah.
For example, she walked into the classroom, as you said. She stormed into the classroom. She drifted into the classroom. She dragged herself into the classroom. She slipped into the classroom. She marched into the classroom. All very, very different emotional kind of pictures for the reader. The other one I usually talk about looking. And in general, if you're doing the line edit, the verb look tends to be one of the super high frequency verbs that you want to go. And even if you didn't want to put strong verbs, you want to do what I call synonyms, because you do not want to have hundreds upon hundreds of look. it gets very repetitive very quickly. So some of the options are glanced, studied, tracked. If like the
Mhm.
person is tracking somebody, like if it's a spy novel or something, like it doesn't have a bit. It could even be in a romance. He tracked her all as she moved across the room. Like, that works. Lingered. His gaze lingered on her. He sized her up. He
Mhm.
scanned the room until he found her. So there are lots of ways to show the looking part versus saying the word look. And I actually have a little note on my phone where whenever I see interesting, strong verbs like this, I actually
Mhm.
write them up by myself. I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. And
Mhm.
then when I'm going through my own line edit, I'm like, pull that up and like, ooh, what good verbs do I have? And I actually scan and I'm like, oh, that's going to work well because I feel like a lot of time in the moment, you're like, is it what? And I don't know. I feel like all of our verbs just evaporate from my head. So it's nice to have those cheat sheets.
Mhm.
Speaking is another one, anything speaking related. I am an advocate in dialogue, and we talked about it, to have strong dialogue first. But there are some phrases that are absolutely good to use in a dialogue, but without something to added to them, they don't really carry the emotional tone. So, for example, if you say, I'm fine, I'm
Mhm.
fine can mean so many different things depending on how you deliver them. So I'm fine she bit out versus I'm fine she muttered would be different.
Mhm.
And we talked about it last time. I am personally totally fine with having other not just said and asked dialogue tags when they serve a purpose. And in lines like that, where the line itself will not be able to show the delivery, having that distinction is going to help. But still, like I would use said most of the time, like try to use other ways to show that. And then the last one, I feel like you talked about it. Also, like to me, I talk at emotional filtering.
Mhm.
So I feel like it's exactly what you mentioned before is how can we show what they are feeling? Because I have a whole class that I teach on emotion. How can the verb show us what the person who is doing the action is feeling? Um, and I feel like you kind of covered that, so I'm not going to go into that
Well,
a lot, but yeah.
I think your examples are great here. You know, we want our characters to feel rich and three dimensional. And when it comes to weak or prose that is, I don't want to say weak, but I want to say generic.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's generic. Then we're like, but who is your character? So choosing a verb, a specific verb, it doesn't have to be strong, it just needs to be specific and intentional, reveals character's intent. And I love your examples here. He quickly grabbed the phone. There we have an adverb. Adverbs aren't wrong, y'all. They're just sometimes we can be more precise with one word versus quickly grabbed. So your examples were great. He snatched the phone, he seized the phone, he lunged for the phone. We've got and I love you say it earlier too, that a strong verb, well, the strong verb can eliminate the adverb, but it
Yeah.
also shows intent and can also hint at subtext. So in this way, verbs, this is what makes verbs the engine of your story or the muscle of your story, because it can do so many things and serve so many purposes. And it's a great place to put your attention when you're ready for edits. It's one of those passes that can really make your prose feel intentional, feel mm, that you really invite us into your character. And I just I can tell when a writer hasn't really put their attention on their specific language yet, because the reading, it feels kind of generic. I come back to generic.
I
So
like generic as a word. Yeah,
yeah.
it makes sense. It's all fixable, and that's one of the things again which I started with is in the first draft. Unless that's how you already automatically write, I don't. It's fine if you want to work on your strong verbs, but I really advocate for waiting a little bit until you do it. And you can actually do specific passes. Like I do a pass on verbs where I have my list of high frequency verbs. I call it a high frequency verb audit. I have my list. And then there are not that many, but once you go through, that is going to take you hours to, when I call it, clean it up, to spiff it up. I have look, walk, turn, go, get, put, feel, smile, stare, saw. Those are kind of generic ones. I also personally have sigh. Like my characters sigh in my first draft and nod. Oh, my characters nod so much. They nod and sigh and nod and sigh. And then I go back and we're like,
Yeah.
let's actually figure out what they are feeling, what they inside are, and what the situation is calling for. That's why I spent time on verbs in the emotions workshop, because they show emotions. But start there. And one of the tricks I always tell people, if you use word, you can actually go into replace option, and then there is, like, you put, for example, looked, and then you replace it with looked, and then you go into the option on the bottom. There is a button that says more, and then there is an option that says um, like different fonts or different highlighters. I usually select font and then change it to a different color, like red. And then what it does, it replaces all looked to all looked are now going to be in red font. So when you look at your page at a glance, you can see how many times you have looked in one chapter. And again, across the board, it's probably still going to be hundreds of looked for a 100K book. That's normal. But if you're looking on the page and you have, 15 looked in one chapter, that's where we have a problem. And that's where the solution is. Let's find strong verbs. Let's find synonyms. Let's sometimes restructure the sentences. How can we restructure the sentence? That's also a valid option. It doesn't always have to be a direct replacement.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I have one example there. Do you want to read the example? Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead and read it, and then I'll paste it in the chat.
So, the original sentence was, she walked to the window and looked outside. She saw the rain hitting the street and turned back toward him. Another option could be, there's so many options how you can change this. She drifted to the window and watched rain hammer the street before facing him again.
Yeah.
So there are some of the things you just take the verb out or you restructure. So I think that a lot of times what I'm looking for when I'm editing it, how can I say this in fewer words? How can I add rhythm to the sentence? And that's another thing I also talk about in my workshop on emotions, is when you are speaking sentences out loud, which I always recommend reading at least once, but hopefully more than once. How does it sound when you're saying it? It should roll off your tongue. It should be easy to say. Is this creating more? Is it adding to the atmosphere? Is there less repetition?
Mhm.
And is there stronger imagery as a result?
That's so great. That's so great. I love that. And I just want to welcome folks in. I see Scott, I see Laurel, welcome. I see Phyllis, and Phyllis has a great question, and Laurel has a question as well. Laurel says, are you familiar with Damon Suede's books, Activate and Verbalize? I haven't read Damon Suede's books. I know about him. And actually, one thing I take away from Damon is he said, when you're working on your character development, give each character a verb. And so this is part of my character creation. I don't just think about what they look like or what their important backstory is and all the details of their life that I need for the story. I assign them a verb. So, and that came from Damon.
Oh,
Yeah. So when you give your character a verb, it invites you to think deeply about the way they move through the world. And this has really helped me make decisions about language. Once I know how they make, I've thought deeply about their verb. Now I understand how do they sound? What is this sort of intent behind them? I've thought deeply about their sense of self and their sense of the world, all these core things that I teach in character development. And that is all encapsulated in their verb. So, yeah. Have you read?
check it out.
Yeah. Have you read Damon's books?
I know his name, but I don't have his books, and I have hundreds of books. So I'm definitely going to go and get more books.
Yes,
Thank you.
more books. And Laurel, so yes, I have defined characters as a verb since I learned that from Damon. Phyllis says, I know it's a potentially radioactive topic, but looking for repetitive use of words be a task for AI in a very specific use case. Well, you could just use Microsoft Word, or, you don't need AI for that. In fact, just to put some framing on it, the tools of Microsoft Word are algorithmic. They're not exactly the LLMs, but we're using computer programs. They've been trained a certain way. That's why you don't always want to take the grammar check word for it in Word, because it's got a certain frame, a certain filter. It's not built for creative writers per se. It will get you going though. Oh,
Yeah,
and Laura said,
I agree there because I
okay.
think you have already all the tools in Word or in Google. And one of the things is that that's why it's important to read through the chapter. And that's why I like highlighting those words and reading through the chapter, because if you just arbitrarily say, okay, replace 20% of look by gaze and replace the other 20% of look by something, it
Mhm.
is not going to elevate your prose. Because remember, the first thing that Beth was talking about is we want to know in this specific situation, what is this specific character feeling and how is this adding to this specific situation that is happening. That's why, yes, we want to have less repetition and we want to have not look, 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 but we want specific, not less repetition that is specific to the character and the situation. And that's where you kind of have to use your human judgment. I don't think that AI can help you right now to do that, fortunately or unfortunately. And yes, it is a long process.
It is.
So buckle up. There is that.
There is
So
that
yeah.
for sure. And I love Laurel shares that being Damon, I assume's example of Snape's verb, Snape being a villain in Harry Potter, is vex. I just love that because it
Um,
says so much about the world, the magical world, and this person's personality. Let's see. Phil says, I need to add, I wasn't saying AI would do the work, but that it would help surface those patterns and then you, the writer, would do the work. Sure. Or you could use, I love, maybe this would be a little cool cheat sheet if you gave those instructions on how you use Word to
oh yeah,
highlight.
we can paste it in the in the post. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That sounds good. So just want to let you all know that both of us have awesome offerings for writers. And I always like to start writers off with my Edit Your Novel checklist. This is for you if you're thinking about, you're learning about how to edit, you're deep in edits, and you want support around revising your novel. So you can get started with the Edit Your Novel checklist, and that will help you figure out how to answer the question, oh my gosh, how do I edit my novel? Well, here's a checklist that you can use step by step, and I offer instructions on how to use it, and a process for that, because I'm all about the creative process, as well as mindset and craft. So this checklist kind of does triple duty. And I want to let people know that you, Gala, have 2 awesome writing classes coming up this summer. I don't know if you saw, I've been promoting you in my newsletter.
Thank you.
And Gala is so great at creating a welcoming environment for writers. And I know you have one class that will be an accountability class, so that
Yeah,
over the summer, people have a place to come to and get their writing done. And then you
perfect.
have a second class, which sounds so juicy. It's really about the deep dive into craft. So a lot more of what we're doing here, but deeper, with an opportunity for people to really deepen their knowledge and know-how and expertise around craft issues for fiction writing, and also get work done and get help from you and that kind of thing. Yeah. Did I sum it up well?
You're so great. You need to be my salesperson forever. Yeah, when we were talking about the second class, I think one of the things that stuck with me was like, if you're one of those people who's like, I like to get smarter, and I like leaving the class knowing like, ooh, I got like this new knowledge that is not necessarily commonplace, and I know how exactly to put it in my work, because that's again, it's like a big thing for me. I don't want you to leave with knowledge. I feel like knowledge is everywhere right now. We have knowledge all around us. If anything, we have it at our fingertips at any second. It is
Mhm.
stopping and applying the knowledge to your work and having the practice. And that's where we become the conversion starts, where we're like, oh, I kind of know this thing, from there to, oh, I can do this thing.
Mhm.
That's where I feel like we're lacking a lot nowadays. And that's what I'm promoting. And that's what I'm doing in all of my classes, because I want you to be the person who can apply it to your own work, who can identify those repetitive words, who can identify the soft verbs and have a very clear understanding of, in this particular case, do I need to do anything here or not? And kind of practice, practice, practice so it becomes automatic. So next time you sit down to do the strong verbs versus soft verbs exercise, it's like, yeah, I know how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to, yeah, easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so I put Gala's information in the chat, and if you have any questions, be sure to follow Gala. Well, you can sign up for her newsletter and also your Substack. I keep forgetting what your Substack is called.
It's called Writing Conversations. I want to say probably, yeah.
Okay. Writing Conversations, or just search for your name, right? Gala Russ.
Yeah, Gala Russ should be there.
Yeah.
We also are going to, in the post, put I put like a little list of those high frequency verbs that you can look for in your own work. And if you have questions,
Yeah, let
always
us know.
comment. Let
Yeah,
us know. We
comment.
love answering questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, what we shared here today we keep these to 30 minutes, is just a tiny snippet so that you can get back to your writing. And before we go, folks have any questions? Also, I'm curious, like Laurel, what are you writing? Phyllis, I know you've been to our Substacks before, but you can remind us what you're working on. I myself am working on an adventure fantasy with romance right now, and copy editing Henrietta the Dragon Slayer. And you're working on, Gala, what are you working on?
I'm working on an urban fantasy, which is a pivot for me because everything that I've written so far was either women's fiction or romance. So this is very trepidatious. But I am officially, as of yesterday, over 25K into it. So
Yes.
that's very exciting.
Very, very.
And because I'm a plantser, I'm a planner, but also a pantser. I discovery write a lot, and I finally I'm getting now into this parts of the story in the chapters where I'm like, oh, that's how this magic works. Because I have the magic system figured out, but then there are instances of like, and he like glued her to the wall with his magic, and I'm like, that's how his magic would work. Ooh, and I'm so excited. And I
Yes.
haven't worked in the fantasy, in like a magic system before in my own writing. And I'm like, oh my God, I really wanted that for so many years. And I was so afraid because just plain contemporary romance writing felt overwhelming. Adding fantasy element to it felt like, oh my God, I'm just going to screw everything up now.
Right.
So now doing it and playing with it, and I'm like, yes, that's what I wanted. This feels so good. This feels so right. And I'm like, don't be afraid. Like if you've always wanted to try a different genre, or if you wanted to try something, again, like this, I feel like I have the same feeling going from YA to adult romance and having more open door things. It's just like, let yourself play, let yourself have the fun. That's why we're writing, like, with
Yeah.
all of the structure and all of the like common sense things that I teach people. I want us to still enjoy the whimsy and the fun and this playfulness. And that's such an amazing thing that we get to do as creatives. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so great. Phyllis is working on YASF, sci-fi. Awesome. Laurel is working on 3 mystery novels and 2 women's historical fiction. Awesome. And Laurel's also part of Inner Circle with Lauren Oberweger, right? Free Expressions. I just taught a class with Lauren's community. I think you were in that class, Laurel, on setting, a 2-part class that was in April and in May on how to use setting in your story and deepen into setting and have setting do like triple duty, just like verbs, and
You're
include.
so great at setting stuff. I definitely want to take one of your setting classes. Setting is my weakest point by far. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
this is where I
Setting,
always want to learn.
yeah. It's so amazing what setting can do. And setting, obviously, as a sci-fi fantasy writer, setting is a deep part of world building, or how we convey our world.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up for today. Next week, we're going to come back to you with another writing topic, probably related to editing, because we love that. And if you have any questions or suggestions, or would like us to cover specific topics, let us know. We bring our collective wisdom. I think I've got 12 books published. You've got like 8, 9 books published. And
Yeah,
that doesn't count the books that have been written that aren't published for one reason or another. So, we
yeah.
both
I
have
think I'm at
so
15 books finished,
yeah.
4 at least unfinished. This is the 5th one that I'm writing, and 9 published. There are lots of reasons why books don't get published. Lots of reasons.
Yeah. And Phyllis says, looking forward to the cheat sheet. So yeah, we're going to be working on that next. Hopefully that'll be up by tomorrow, if not in a couple of hours. So thank you everyone so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Substack Lives are such a fun way to connect with folks and teach and to drop a little knowledge and connect with y'all. So we'll see you next week at, probably no, I'm not going to be able to do next week because of traveling, and it's a Memorial Day holiday here in the United States. So you might be running one on your own, in which case we'll get the word out. But I will definitely be here in 2 weeks. Thanks for all those hearts coming on down the line. Love it, love it. Follow us on Substack. Check out our awesome freebies and courses and all that. And we're here to help you. So let us know how we can be of best support. That's it for today, everyone. Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Bye.